Gabriel considered himself an expert in the horror genre. He had watched every disturbing movie, read the darkest forums on the internet, and explored every corner of the deep web in search of stories that could make him shudder. But nothing ever seemed to affect him. It was all fiction, cheap hoaxes, or failed attempts at being scary. That night, he decided to try his luck once more. After hours of browsing through clandestine forums, he found a thread titled, "The video no one has been able to finish." The original post contained only a warning. Do not watch it alone. Do not share it. Do not speak of it. The link led to a direct download, a file named dio__.avi, barely 6 megabytes in size. "Is that all?" he muttered, feeling a mix of disappointment and curiosity. He hesitated for a few seconds, but his obsession with horror pushed him forward. He double-clicked. For a moment, he thought his computer had frozen. Then the video began. It was a low-resolution recording. It showed a dark room, barely illuminated by the flickering light of a ceiling lamp. In the center of the room, a blurry figure stood motionless. It had no face, just a hazy shadow, as if the video had been poorly recorded. The figure began to whisper. The words were incomprehensible, a distorted murmur that sounded like a mix of echoes and multiple overlapping voices. The more it spoke, the more he felt a pressure in his chest, as if something were watching him from inside his own room. Suddenly, the video cut off. The screen went completely black. The hum of his PC's fan stopped. The entire room fell silent. Gabriel frowned and moved his mouse. Nothing. His computer was dead. Then his phone vibrated on the desk. A notification. An unknown number. New message, "Now you know too much." Gabriel couldn't sleep that night. Even though he tried to convince himself it was just a trick, a simple corrupted file, his mind kept replaying the images from the video. That blurry silhouette. That incomprehensible whisper. The next morning, he turned on his computer. It worked normally. But when he searched for the file dio__.avi, it was gone. Not in downloads, not in the trash, not in any directory. Impossible, he whispered. He opened his browsing history. The forum where he had found the link had disappeared, as if it had never existed. That same night, while watching a show on his computer, he noticed something strange on the screen. In the dark reflections of the monitor, he saw a shadow move behind him. He spun around. Nothing. The room was empty, but the reflection was still there. A chill ran down his spine. He turned off his computer and got into bed. The sound of breathing in his room was louder than ever. At 3:33 a.m., his phone rang. He swiped to answer, his throat dry. "Hello?" No response. Just heavy breathing. Slow deep. He hung up. The call was from an unknown number. The next day, he tried to shake it off. He called his best friend, Jorge. "Dude, I need you to see something. I found a video on the deep web, but it disappeared from my PC. I sent you the link last night. Tell me you downloaded it." There was a pause. "What are you talking about?" Jorge sounded confused. "The video. The one I sent you." "You didn't send me anything." Gabriel felt his stomach drop. He opened their chat and checked his sent messages. The link wasn't there. Something didn't want him to share it. And worse, something was already watching him. Gabriel barely slept. The shadows and the reflections, the late-night calls, the constant feeling of being watched. It was becoming unbearable. Every time he closed his eyes, he felt a presence beside his bed. He couldn't see it, but he knew it was there. That night, he decided to do something different. He placed his phone on his desk and started recording. If there was something in his room, he would catch it on video. Exhaustion finally overtook him, and for the first time in days, he fell asleep. The next morning, heart pounding, he grabbed his phone and checked the footage. At first, nothing seemed strange. Just him sleeping. Hours passed in silence, until 3:33 a.m. Suddenly, his body moved. Still asleep, Gabriel slowly sat up in bed. His movements were stiff, unnatural, as if something was forcing him to get up. Then he looked straight at the camera. His eyes, completely white. He stayed like that for almost a minute, not blinking, not moving, and then he whispered something. The audio was barely a murmur. But when he turned up the volume, he heard it clearly. "You're not alone anymore." The video ended. Gabriel dropped his phone. His breathing was heavy, his skin ice cold. That hadn't been a dream. The entity was no longer in the video. It was inside him now. Panic took hold of Gabriel. Jorge wasn't answering his messages or calls. He went to his house, knocked hard on the door, but no one answered. The silence was oppressive. He looked through the window and saw his friend's computer was still on. Something inside him told him to go in. He forced the door open and ran to Jorge's room. But the room was covered in blood, and Jorge was nowhere to be found. On the desk there was a piece of paper. The red ink looked fresh. "You can't undo what you've seen." A shiver ran down Gabriel's spine. The chair was overturned. Jorge's headphones were still plugged into the PC. His glass of water was still half full. It was as if he had vanished in the middle of an action. Gabriel didn't stay any longer. On his way home, his phone vibrated. A new message. It was a video. His hands trembled as he opened it. The image appeared and he felt the air leave his lungs. He saw himself, standing in the darkness. The same empty smile. The same void in his eyes. Gabriel felt a lump in his throat. He had no memory of recording that. Shaking, he opened his security camera footage. There had to be an explanation. He rewound to the early morning hours. At 3:33 a.m., the image turned to static for a second. When it restored, he was standing in his room. Threads of blood slid from his eyes. His trembling hands touched his face. And soon, the skin began to give way under his nails. The flesh peeled away, revealing the cold, white surface beneath his skin. Gabriel turned off his PC as a cold tightness filled his lungs. Suddenly, loud knocks echoed through the door. Gabriel began to shake, and then his body tensed in overwhelming pain. Slowly, he started walking toward the door. He tried to stop with all his strength, but his legs wouldn't obey. Something was calling him. Something wanted to see him. When he reached the door, the knocking stopped. His hand grasped the doorknob.